Hello and welcome back to Real Conversations from House of Scripture. I'm Jim Dattilo. I'm one of the elders up here. We are located in Canton, Georgia. If you ever like to come up and visit us, let us know. Look at our website, give us a call, find the directions, come on up and see us. I'm here tonight with our senior elder and our pastor, Tom Eubank. Good subject tonight.
Looks like it. I'm looking forward to it, Jim.
Good subject tonight.
Yep.
So, this happens more than any of us would like to see.
That's true.
Some of us are involved in it, either through our parents or something that happened within our own marriages. But tonight I'd like to discuss, are Christians permitted to divorce?
Good topic.
Are Christians permitted to divorce? It's difficult in that it affects so many people and has many repercussions for those involved. I know for the children that are involved in divorce and also for those that were in the marriage and it ends up in divorce. It's very difficult. It's very emotional and painful.
Right.
Help us out.
I'll do my best, Jim. This is a very complex topic. I'm going to start out by saying it's never God's desire for us to divorce. He hates divorce. It's something that is appalling to him because he wants us to come together, to become unified as a couple, to become echad in Hebrew, which is to become one. In the same way that Jesus said that I am one with the Father and I want you to be one with me. We still maintain our identity. Your wife is still your wife, you're you. She's a female, you're a male, but you come together in your purpose, in your connection with each other and your drive. Everything that you're trying to do in life, your goals should be unified, and especially your faith should be unified. So God desired for us to stay together for life. That was his perfect will for us. However, the problem arises when we have all these different religious doctrines that claim certain things. One is you can't be divorced. Other one is if you do get divorced, you can never remarry. And the reason this is a problem is because most of our New Testaments in English tell us that. I mean, it says, except for adultery, you cannot get divorced, is what he says in most of our English translations. It also goes on to say that he who marries a divorced woman commits adultery himself and causes her to commit adultery, I believe. So this is where a lot of people are going to get upset. And so before I say what I'm going to say, because it will upset the apple cart, so to speak, I challenge anybody that's listening to go look this up in Scripture for themselves. Study this out, because this is not something you should just hear what I have to say or any preacher and just automatically assume that that's correct. You need to study this out for yourself. The first question you have to ask is, why would Jesus say that only in the exception for divorce is adultery when the penalty for adultery is the death penalty? The death penalty for the adulteress and the adulterer, the male and the female. They were to be stoned to death. So it would make no sense. If that's what he actually said, they would have tried to stone him on the spot because he would have been teaching against the Torah. Number two, how would Jesus teach against the Torah when he said that not one jot or tittle of the Torah is done away with? So I cannot pinpoint, because I'm not a Greek scholar. I don't have access to the 5,000 plus Greek manuscripts that were used to create the New Testament. But if we take a look at where was it spoken of in the Torah, you go back to Deuteronomy and it talks about divorce. And it does not say that except for the case of adultery, you can be divorced. It says, in the case of erva matters, you are then permitted to divorce your wife. So erva matters literally means sexual impropriety. So, okay, so this is on the table, sexual impropriety. That does not include adultery, because we just said adultery would have been the death penalty. In fact, if you read Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20, it's going to give you a lot of different sexual impropriety that leads to the death penalty. And I don't need to go into that. It's vulgar, it's disgusting, but God gave it because that's what was going on in the land they were going into in Canaan. So if you throw out adultery because the Torah gives permission for divorce in the cases of sexual impropriety, then you have to ask, well, what could that be? And that's a loaded question because it could be a number of things. But one of them is not giving your conjugal marital rights to your partner, your spouse. That would, if that was something that was an extended period of time. Now, I hate to say this, but the Western world that we live in, that's very commonplace. I hear all the time, like, my partner won't have sexual relations with me. This is a real conversation, Jim. We're just going to lay it out on the table.
That's why we're here.
And they'll go 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and they have no relations with one another. That is, not only is it against what the scriptures say, but that's when you open the door for Satan to come in and wreak havoc on the marriage. So Yeshua, Jesus, would never have been teaching against divorce, except for the Torah commanded prescription, which is erva matters. Now, there were a lot of strict things going on back in that day too. So back in the day, a woman would never be alone with another man. However, I would suggest to you that that's not a good idea even today. And here at House of Scripture, there's many of the men who have wives here that I'm very friendly with, that we're good friends, but I would never be caught alone with them because I don't even want the appearance of evil. So it's a thing, if a woman was openly flirting in the streets with other men and bringing shame on the family, it could be a number of things. And I can't pretend to know what they all are, but I do know that Jesus never disrespected the Torah. He never changed the Torah. In fact, he said he couldn't do that. So we have to look beyond just what we see in the English versions of our Bibles.
You have a spouse that has committed adultery today.
Right.
We're not going to stone them.
No, of course not.
Is that enough for the victim, the spouse, to file for a divorce?
Absolutely. So anytime that there was adultery committed, that was a plausible grounds, because you've broken the most serious and the most crucial trust that can be between two partners, and God did permit that, because I can't even imagine someone having to go through that. I really, and I've counseled people that have gone through it, and I've told them, I said, look, if you want to get divorced now, you have biblical grounds to do so. However, if you love your wife and you want to work through this, I will work with you, and I will counsel you, and I said, this can be the hardest journey you've ever gone through in your life. And I remember one man about 7 years ago wanted to do that, and he did work through it. Now they are still together to this day. How their relationship is, I don't know. But we just had a couple down at the trade show we did a few weeks ago, and he walked up to the booth, and he didn't recognize my wife because we haven't seen him for 13 years. But this was a couple that was on the verge of divorce. We spent a week with them in Cancun, and we literally were just counseling 7 days a week, the whole week long. And the very last day we were there, when we thought all was lost, they finally came to terms. They recommitted their lives to one another. I got to remarry them, do a little small service. And he gave his testimony to us now 12, 13 years later. They're doing wonderful. They're actually in ministry helping other couples to overcome this, because it's such a tough subject to overcome. So, I think God would say is, if you're strong enough and you can work through it, that's wonderful. I'll be here to strengthen you. But it is one place that we are permitted to divorce.
I'm going to go off script.
Good.
You're a person that your spouse is cheating on you. You did get a divorce. What advice or counsel can you say to that person who receives a lot of guilt and condemnation from others in the church?
Well, there's a couple things I would say to them. Number one was, did this happen before you came to Messiah, before you became a Christian or someone truly following, Jesus? Because if it did, there's no condemnation. It's kind of like one of the worst things.
But the premise I'm setting here is
Yep.
they were cheated on. There was a
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you've gotten past that and you still have this guilt, because a lot of people still carry the guilt, even if it was the spouse that cheated, but you divorced, you still have this guilt, and that's something that's been unfairly put on people. But if it's before we came into Messiah, we shouldn't carry guilt from our past, no matter what has happened. But if it was when we were Christians and it happened, because it does happen, unfortunately, I wish I could say that the Christian divorce rate and infidelity rate was much better, but unfortunately it's not. It's about the same as the world. I would say that first of all is you don't know what your spouse was going through. You need to forgive them even if you can't get past the pain, right? The number one thing you got to do is be able to forgive the person. Now, forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, right? So you have to be able to forgive them, because if you can't forgive them, then we know that our Father can't forgive us. But second of all, don't allow man-made ideas on the Scripture to condemn you or make you feel guilt. And the reason that's so important is God doesn't look at things the way we do. And I realize that a lot of teachers and preachers are following the mandate of their denominational doctrine. And I don't want to get into that in detail, but if the Scriptures give permission for divorce under the circumstance of infidelity, and really, I mean, we should be grateful that we weren't stoned to death for that, right? It's a very serious and grievous sin in God's eyes. But he can forgive us from that too. And the one who was the one that committed adultery, they can be forgiven as well. I don't want them to feel like they got to carry guilt and shame the rest of their life. We have to get past that. And we have to understand that God's grace and his mercy is far beyond anything we can imagine. And we need to walk in victory.
Okay, so in Matthew 19, Yeshua suggests that Moses permitted divorce due to the hardness of man's heart.
Right.
This is mentioned in Deuteronomy 24 as well. Has divorce become too convenient today?
Well, certainly it has. The number one, I was reading online just to find out what's the number one cause of divorce, and I thought it would have been infidelity. It's not. Today in America, not worldwide. In America, the number one cause for divorce is a spouse feeling less esteemed than they think they should be. They just don't feel like they get value from their partner. 50 to 70% of all divorces are filed by women. College-educated women, it's up to 80 to 90%. That was an eye-opener for me. They're not feeling valued. And so to that, I would say this. Husbands should be doing a better job at treating our wives with value and the love that God wants us to honor them with. However, that's not an excuse for divorce. It's an excuse for counseling. It's an excuse to tell your spouse he needs to do better, that we have a real issue here. But it's not an excuse for divorce. So I really think that it all comes down to, if we have a heart for God, we're going to want to work this out, because we got to think of our wives, for us as men, our wives, and for the women out there listening, think of your husband as a son or daughter of the Most High God. And so when I look at my wife Cornelia, and of course I love her and we get along very well, but if anything even slightly upsets me, I always think, she's a daughter of the King. I better be really careful about how I treat her. And she's quick to remind me of that every once in a while when I need it. So, but rightly so. I deserve it.
Yeah. So back in episode 13, we were discussing the importance of believers understanding that when living for Messiah, that we're actually living within a covenant.
Right.
We're living within his word. Can we discuss how entering marriage is actually entering into a covenantal relationship and the importance of that?
Yeah, absolutely. A marriage covenant is, like all covenants, was intended to be permanent, right? And I think we mentioned that. And when we did a study of Abraham's life, and we studied the different covenants throughout the Bible, And they've narrowed it down to 6 or 7 primary covenants. There's more than that. But, covenants were all layered, meaning one covenant does not annul a previous one. But when we get to marriage, we're, especially in today's day and time, so my wife and I we aren't our first marriage, right? So we had previous spouses, and she got divorced, but her husband died. And I, was foolish when I was young and married the wrong person. And so you find yourself in this life, but I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't a believer. I didn't know any better. But now that I understand it, covenant relationship is, number one, permanent. There's no such thing as a temporary covenant. You don't make a covenant with somebody for 4 weeks. A covenant is permanent. Number two, a covenant is way deeper than a contract. And we view it as a contract because we all have all these stipulations that, and even in the marriage vows, like when I do a wedding, which is not too often, but when I do one, I don't ever use the traditional, in sickness and in health and all these different things that they say, because it almost gives like limitations to it. We should go into it like, I'm going to finish the race with this person. And a covenant relationship, back in the day, if you broke a covenant, it was death. So we don't understand this because we're out of it. And I think it would take too long to go completely into the cutting of covenants, where you cut the parts of an animal. The intent was, when you walk through the parts of the animal, is just as this animal was killed, slaughtered, and cut in half, so will your life be if you break this covenant. So that's just a very brief version of it. And if we went into this and we understood this is a life commitment, and my wife, I married her because I loved her one day. We live in a day and time where we have no arranged marriages, right? Or at least not here in the West. So we made a choice to marry her, and she made a choice to marry us. We need to work through the challenges and the difficulties, and get yourself into a good church that understands covenant, where they can counsel you properly and get you on the path to a healthy relationship.
Good advice. And I think that comes from a believer's viewpoint, because the world is out there. I don't even know if many of them get married anymore.
You're probably right.
So but for those of us that are believers, thank you for sharing that. I know that's something personal for you, because you have gone through that, and just being transparent with our viewers. And so if you have comments about this, we'd love to see them. Your thoughts on it. Have you been divorced or are struggling with guilt? Anything like that? We want to let you know that Messiah loves you, and that there's forgiveness, and there's a chance to move on.
That's right.
In our lives. And if we're truly repentant and remorseful.
Can I add one more thing real quick?
You can.
We don't really, we tell people we're at House of Scripture. We don't promote going to our website. However, if there's something that you've really, really struggled with, and you don't have any place in your home or in your where you live, where you can go and get good counsel, and you just want some good advice, feel free to email us. My wife and I are both on the website with our email address. I just want to throw that out there. We're not trying to get you, we don't even have an email list that we hit e-blast to people, but if you want to just contact us, you need some freedom, you need some help getting past some of the shame or the guilt that you have felt in the past, please don't hesitate to call. We're here for you.
It's a good word. So thank you for tuning in. This was a pretty serious subject this evening. It's one that is definitely a real conversation, because many people have gone through a divorce or a victim of a divorce. So we wanted to share that tonight with you. It was a very important topic. So thank you for tuning in. If you don't mind, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would be quite helpful. Give us a like if you don't mind, and then share these videos with someone else. If you know someone that's gone through a divorce, struggling about a divorce in their life, a child of a divorce, send this video out, share it, let's get it out there. Thank you for tuning in. We certainly appreciate your time and just spending a few minutes with us, and we'll see you next time.